He signed the divorce papers with a flourish, using a Mont Blanc pen he had bought on credit while his wife Sarah counted change for a bus ticket. Lucas looked at her with pure contempt, convinced she was the anchor dragging his brilliant potential into the mud. He was leaving her for a woman driving a Porsche, certain he had finally upgraded his life. He didn't know that 3 hours prior a law firm in Zurich had verified a DNA test. Sarah wasn't just a broke waitress. She was the sole heiress to the Obsidian Skyline estate. And Lucas had just walked away from half of $1.3 billion. The radiator in the cramped apartment in the Bronx hissed and sputtered a dying mechanical breath that matched the atmosphere in the room. Sarah Bennett scraped the last of the pasta onto a chipped ceramic plate. It was plain spaghetti with butter and garlic powder because the bank account sat at exactly $12.43 until her shift at the diner on Friday. She placed the plate on the table, the steam rising in the cold air. "Lucas, dinner is ready." Lucas O'Connell didn't look up from his laptop. He was sitting on their second-hand sofa, the blue light of the screen illuminating a face twisted in permanent annoyance. He was typing furiously, working on a pitch deck for Harrington Global, the real estate firm where he worked as a junior associate. He wasn't a broker yet, just a glorified assistant, but he wore the ambition like a suit of armor. "I'm not hungry, Sarah," he snapped, finally closing the laptop with a sharp clack. "I ate at Cipriani with the team." Sarah felt a pang of hunger in her own stomach, but she ignored it. "Cipriani, Lucas, that costs more than our weekly grocery budget." "Did the company pay?" Lucas stood up, adjusting his silk tie, a tie Sarah had bought him for his birthday by working double shifts for a month. "No, the company didn't pay. I paid. It's called networking, Sarah. It's called investing in a future. Something you wouldn't understand while you're wiping tables at that grease pit." The insult landed softly familiar and worn. For 3 years, Sarah had supported him. When he failed the bar exam, she paid the rent. When he decided to pivot to real estate, she paid for his licensing courses. She walked to work to save subway fare so he could take Ubers to meetings, terrified he would look low class, arriving on foot. "I understand investing," Sarah said quietly, sitting down to eat the cold pasta alone. "But we have rent due on Tuesday. The landlord, Mr. Henderson, said he won't wait this time." Lucas laughed a cruel, dry sound. He walked over to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked alleyway and the overflowing dumpsters. "Mr. Henderson, that cockroach. You worry about pennies, Sarah. That's your problem. You have a poverty mindset. I spent $300 on lunch today because I sat next to Bradley Pierce. Do you know who that is? He's the VP of Acquisitions. He liked my suit. He liked my ideas." "Did he give you a raise?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. Lucas spun around, his eyes blazing. "You just don't get it. You're an anchor, Sarah. You're heavy. You hold me in this filth." He gestured around the apartment that Sarah kept meticulously clean despite its decay. "I walk into that office and I feel like a king. Then I come home to you smelling like diner coffee and desperation, and I remember I'm nobody." Sarah put the fork down. She had lost her appetite. "I smell like diner coffee because I worked 10 hours today to pay for that suit you're wearing." "And that's the best you'll ever do," Lucas sneered. He walked to the bedroom and grabbed a duffel bag from the closet. It was already packed. Sarah's heart stopped. The silence in the room suddenly felt heavier than the arguments. "Lucas, what is that?" "I'm staying at a hotel tonight," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I need headspace. Big day tomorrow. I can't listen to you whining about rent and pasta." "We can't afford a hotel," Sarah whispered, standing up, panic rising in her chest. "I can," Lucas said, pulling a sleek silver credit card from his pocket. It wasn't their joint debit card. It was a platinum card Sarah had never seen. "I got approved last week. High limit. For high achievers." He didn't look back as he walked out the door. He didn't see the tears finally spill over Sarah's cheeks. He only saw the exit sign glowing red, marking his escape from a life he felt he was too good for. The hotel Lucas had mentioned was actually the penthouse suite at the St. Regis, but he wasn't paying for it. Jessica Vane was. Jessica was everything Sarah was not. She was the daughter of a tech mogul, a woman who had never worked a day in her life, but held a consultant title at a fashion firm. She had blonde hair treated by the best stylists in Manhattan's skin that glowed from weekly facials, and a laugh that sounded like champagne bubbling over. Lucas lay back on the 800 thread count sheets watching Jessica pour 2 glasses of vintage Pinot Noir. "Did you do it?" Jessica asked, handing him the glass. Her nails were painted a sharp blood red. "I left," Lucas said, taking a sip. The wine tasted like freedom. "I didn't tell her it was permanent yet. I need to get the paperwork drafted." Jessica sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair. "You know my father can't give you that position at Vane Technologies if you're still attached to her. It's a bad look, Lucas. A man of your potential with a waitress, it screams bad judgment." "I know," Lucas said, his grip tightening on the glass. "She's just pathetic. She thinks small. She counts coupons. It's exhausting." "Well, you don't have to worry about coupons anymore." Jessica smiled, leaning in to kiss him. "My lawyer, Mr. Pembroke, drafted the papers for you. They're in my bag. We can serve her tomorrow." The next afternoon, the rain had turned into a torrential downpour. Sarah was sitting at the small kitchen table staring at the unpaid electric bill when the knock came. She jumped up thinking it was Lucas coming home to apologize. She had rehearsed what she would say, that she supported him, but they needed to be a team. She opened the door, a hopeful smile on her face. It wasn't Lucas. It was a process server, a burly man in a wet raincoat who shoved a thick manila envelope into her chest. "Sarah O'Connell." "Yes." "You've been served." As the man turned to leave, Lucas stepped out from the hallway shadows. He was wearing a new trench coat, dry and pristine, holding a large umbrella over a woman Sarah had only seen in magazines. "Lucas?" Sarah gasped, clutching the envelope. "Read it, Sarah," Lucas said coldly. "Irreconcilable differences. I'm filing for immediate dissolution." The woman, Jessica, looked at Sarah with a mixture of pity and disgust. She scanned Sarah's worn gray sweater and the messy bun in her hair. "So this is her," Jessica said, her voice dripping with amusement. "She really does look like she belongs in this neighborhood. Please." Sarah stepped into the hallway, ignoring the cold spray of rain blowing in. "Lucas, we've been together since college. You can't just do this in the hallway." "I can," Lucas said. "And there's one more thing. The lease." Sarah froze. "What about it?" "It's in my name." Lucas stated, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "I spoke to the landlord this morning. I told him I'm terminating the lease effective immediately. He's already agreed to relist the unit. You have 24 hours to vacate." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. 24 hours, Lucas, I have nowhere to go. I have $12. My family is gone. You are my family. "I was your family," Lucas corrected her. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Jessica's ear, a gesture of intimacy he hadn't shown Sarah in years. "Now I'm moving on. Jessica and I are going to Paris next week. I need a clean break. No baggage." "You're kicking me out on the street." Sarah's voice cracked a sound of pure heartbreak. "You're a survivor, Sarah," Lucas said dismissively, turning his back. "Go pick up an extra shift. Find a shelter. I don't care. Just don't contact me. My lawyer will handle the rest." He guided Jessica down the stairs, their footsteps echoing on the concrete. Sarah stood in the doorway, the envelope damp in her hands. She watched them get into a sleek black Mercedes waiting at the curb. As the car drove away, splashing muddy water onto the sidewalk, Sarah realized she wasn't just heartbroken. She was destitute. She went back inside and packed the few things she owned into 2 plastic garbage bags. She left the furniture. She couldn't carry it. She left the wedding photos. She couldn't look at them. That night, Sarah slept in the waiting room of the bus station on 42nd Street. She used her bag as a pillow, clutching the divorce papers to her chest, terrified that if she let go, she would fall off the edge of the world. She didn't know that 50 blocks uptown, a private investigator named Arthur Penhaligon was frantically trying to find her holding a file that contained the deed to half the skyline of Manhattan. 3 days later, Sarah was unrecognizable. The exhaustion hung under her eyes like bruises. She had used the last of her money to buy a coffee just to be allowed to sit inside a 24-hour deli near Central Park to escape the biting wind. She had tried to call her boss at the diner, but her phone service had been cut off that morning. Another bill Lucas used to pay that he had silently canceled. She had missed 3 shifts. She was fired. She sat on the high stool, staring out the window at the wealthy people passing by. Women in furs, men in tailored suits, the world Lucas wanted so desperately to be part of. "Excuse me, miss." Sarah flinched, pulling her coat tighter around her. She expected the manager to kick her out. "I'm leaving," she whispered, sliding off the stool. "I just needed a minute." "No, please sit down," a voice said. It was deep, cultivated, and gentle. Sarah looked up. Standing before her was an older man, perhaps in his late 60s. He wore a charcoal wool coat that looked older than she was, but expensive. He held a black umbrella and a leather briefcase. His eyes were kind, framed by wire-rimmed glasses. "Are you Sarah Bennett?" the man asked. He used her maiden name. Sarah hesitated. I was. It's O'Connell now, but I'm changing it back soon." The man let out a long breath as if he had just finished a marathon. "Thank heavens. I've been looking for you for 72 hours. I went to your apartment in the Bronx, but the landlord said you'd been evicted. I checked the diner, they said you were gone." "Who are you?" Sarah asked, taking a step back. "Did Lucas send you?" "I signed the papers. I mailed them. He doesn't need to harass me." The man shook his head vigorously. "I do not know who Lucas is, but I can assure you I am not here on his behalf. My name is Reginald Graves. I am the senior executor for the estate of the late Arthur Pendleton." Sarah frowned. "Arthur, I think that was my grandmother's brother. I never met him. My mother said he was a hermit." "A hermit, yes." Reginald smiled faintly. "But a very productive one. May I—" He gestured to the empty stool next to her. Sarah nodded, too confused to object. Reginald sat down and placed the briefcase on the sticky counter. "Your great-uncle Arthur passed away 2 weeks ago. He had no children. His wife passed years ago. He was estranged from your side of the family because, well, he was a difficult man. Paranoid. He didn't trust banks, didn't trust the government, and certainly didn't trust his peers." "I'm sorry he died," Sarah said politely, though her stomach rumbled loudly. Reginald heard it. He raised a hand to the server. "2 sandwiches, please. The roast beef and fresh coffee." He turned back to Sarah. "Arthur was a land banker. Do you know what that is?" "No," Sarah said. "In the 1970s and 80s, when New York was crumbling, Arthur bought land. Lots of it. Parking lots, abandoned warehouses, old tenement buildings. He bought them for pennies. He never developed them. He just held them." Reginald unlocked the briefcase. He created a holding company called Obsidian Trust. For 40 years, the city grew up around his properties. Skyscrapers were built around his lots. Developers begged him to sell. He never did. He pulled out a thick document bound in blue velvet. "Sarah, the Obsidian Trust owns the land under 17 major skyscrapers in Manhattan. It owns 2 city blocks in Brooklyn. It owns the commercial complex currently leased by Harrington Global." Sarah's breath hitched. "Harrington Global? That's where my husband works." "Your ex-husband," Reginald corrected gently. "As of his filing, he has legally separated his assets from yours, which is fortunate for you." "Why?" Reginald opened the folder. "Because Arthur Pendleton left everything to his only living blood relative. You." Sarah stared at the papers. The numbers blurred. I don't understand. Is there money? Reginald adjusted his glasses. The cash reserves in the trust are approximately $80 million. But the real estate portfolio, based on the current market valuation of the land rights and the lease incomes. He paused, looking her dead in the eye. The portfolio is valued at $1.3 billion. The deli went silent. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to stop. Sarah gripped the edge of the counter. Billion, she whispered. With a B. With a B, Reginald confirmed. And there is one more thing. As the sole owner of the land, you have controlling interest in the lease agreements. The building at 400 Park Avenue, the headquarters of Harrington Global. Their 99-year lease had a termination clause triggered by the death of the original owner. You have the right to renegotiate their rent, or evict them. Sarah sat there, the smell of roast beef sandwiches suddenly filling the air. She thought of Lucas. She thought of his poverty mindset speech. She thought of Jessica Vane and her Porsche. She thought of the rain on her face as she walked away from her home with 2 garbage bags. She looked at her reflection in the deli window. She looked tired, dirty, and broken. But Reginald Graves was looking at her like she was the Queen of England. Mr. Graves, Sarah said, her voice finding a strength she didn't know she had left. I think I'm going to need a very good lawyer, and a shower. Reginald smiled, closing the briefcase. I have a car waiting outside Ms. Bennett, and I have taken the liberty of booking the presidential suite at the plaza, under your name. Sarah stood up. She left the garbage bags on the floor. She wouldn't need them where she was going. The transformation of Sarah Bennett did not happen overnight. It was not a montage of shopping bags and salon visits, though those certainly played a part. It was a rigorous, painful, and exhilarating deconstruction of the person Lucas had convinced her she was. For the first month, Sarah lived inside the Plaza Hotel, but she rarely saw the city. Her suite became a command center. Reginald Graves, true to his word, had assembled a team that functioned less like a legal counsel and more like a Praetorian Guard. There was Henrietta, a 60-year-old forensic accountant who could find a missing penny in a billion-dollar ledger, and David, a crisis management specialist who had previously worked for the State Department. You are not just wealthy, Sarah, Reginald told her one Tuesday morning over a breakfast of smoked salmon and poached eggs. You are a sovereign power in this city, but power without knowledge is dangerous. You need to understand what you own. And so Sarah studied. She sat for 10 hours a day learning the intricacies of air rights, commercial zoning laws, and triple net leases. She learned to read a balance sheet better than she had ever read a dinner menu. She learned the language of the elite, the silence that speaks louder than shouting, the handshake that signals a deal, and the gaze that dismisses a fool without a word. While Sarah sharpened her mind, she also rebuilt her armor. The worn gray sweaters and sensible shoes were incinerated literally. Henrietta had insisted on a ceremonial burning in the hotel fireplace. In their place came a wardrobe of structural, intimidating elegance. Sarah favored monochrome sharp white blazers, tailored black trousers, and dresses in deep navy that fit like a second skin. Her hair, once a frizzy afterthought, was cut into a sleek, angular bob that framed her face, highlighting high cheekbones she hadn't known she possessed. But the most significant change was her eyes. The fear was gone. The desperation that had made her tolerate Lucas's cruelty had evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. Meanwhile, oblivious to the storm gathering above his head, Lucas O'Connell was enjoying what he believed was his meteoric rise. With Sarah gone, he had thrown himself into his new life with Jessica Vane. Jessica's father, realizing Lucas was now unencumbered, had opened doors at Harrington Global that were previously locked. Lucas was promoted to Senior Director of Acquisitions. He bought a penthouse in Tribeca, heavily leveraged, of course, and leased a Maserati. You see, Lucas told Jessica one evening at a gala at the Met, I told you she was the problem. I cut the dead weight and look at me now. I'm flying. Jessica sipped her champagne, her eyes scanning the room for photographers. "You look good, Lucas. Just make sure the divorce is finalized. Daddy says the Vane family image needs to be pristine before the wedding." "It's done," Lucas assured her. "She signed everything. She didn't even ask for alimony. Probably too stupid to know she could. She's probably back in some trailer park in Ohio by now." He laughed, a sound that grated on the ears of the few people nearby who knew the truth. Rumors were swirling in the upper echelons of New York real estate. A new player had emerged. No one had seen her face, but the name Obsidian Trust was suddenly on everyone's lips. They were buying adjacent lots, consolidating power, and refusing meetings with the city's biggest developers. They called the owner the Ghost. Lucas, arrogant in his new position, dismissed the rumors. "Ghosts don't sign contracts," he told his boss, the CEO of Harrington Global, a bullish man named Victor Moretti. "It's probably some foreign conglomerate hiding behind a shell company. I'll handle them when the time comes." The time came sooner than he expected. It was a rainy Tuesday in November, 6 months after Sarah had been evicted. Victor Moretti summoned Lucas to his office. The CEO looked pale, sweating through his custom shirt. "Sit down, O'Connell," Victor barked. Lucas sat, crossing his legs confidently. "What's the play, Victor? We acquiring the Hudson Yards project." "We're in trouble," Victor said, sliding a thick letter across the mahogany desk. It bore the seal of Obsidian Trust. "The lease on this building, the headquarters, it expires in 30 days. Lucas frowned. "I thought we had a 99-year lock." "We did," Victor snapped. "But the original owner died. The contract has a change of control clause. The new owner, this Obsidian Trust, has the right to terminate, and they just sent notice." Lucas picked up the letter. The language was standard, but the implication was catastrophic. If Harrington Global lost its headquarters, the stock would tank. They had millions of dollars in infrastructure, servers, and trading floors built into the tower. Moving would cost a fortune they didn't have. "They're bluffing," Lucas scoffed. "They want a rent hike. Everyone wants a squeeze." "It's not a squeeze, Lucas," Victor said, his voice trembling. "Read the last paragraph." Lucas scanned to the bottom. "The trust is not interested in renewal at the current market rate. We intend to repurpose the property. You have 30 days to vacate." "Vacate?" Lucas stood up. "That's insane. Who is the contact?" "A lawyer named Reginald Graves," Victor said. "He's agreed to one meeting, next Friday. He says the principal will be there." "The principal, the owner, the Ghost." Victor looked at Lucas with desperate eyes. "You're the closer, Lucas. You're the hotshot who says he can sell ice to an Eskimo. I'm putting this on you. Fix it. Get us a renewal. I don't care what it costs. Just keep us in this building. If you fail, Harrington Global collapses, and your career goes down with it." Lucas straightened his tie. He felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the challenge that would define him. "Consider it done, Victor. I'll charm this Ghost. Whoever he is, he has a price. Everyone has a price." Lucas walked out of the office, already mentally spending the bonus he would get for saving the company. He didn't know that the Ghost he was preparing to manipulate was the same woman he had left crying over a bowl of spaghetti. The week leading up to the meeting was a frenzy of preparation for Lucas. He researched Reginald Graves and found nothing but a pristine record of high-end estate management. He tried to dig into Obsidian Trust, but the privacy walls were impenetrable. "It's frustrating," Lucas complained to Jessica over dinner at Le Bernardin. "It's like fighting a shadow. I don't even know if the owner is a man or a woman, old or young." "Does it matter?" Jessica asked, bored. She was scrolling through wedding venues on her phone. "Just dazzle them. Use that smile. It worked on me." "It worked on you because you have taste." Lucas smirked. "This owner, if they're holding on to old land, they're probably some ancient dinosaur. Conservative. Old money. I'll go in with the heritage and legacy pitch. They eat that stuff up." On the morning of the meeting, Lucas dressed with military precision. He wore his most expensive suit, a navy bespoke piece from Savile Row. He wore the watch Jessica had given him as an engagement present, a $50,000 Patek Philippe. He wanted to reek of success. He wanted the Obsidian owner to know they were dealing with an equal. The meeting was set for 10:00 a.m. at the Obsidian Trust temporary offices. Lucas expected a dusty old law library. Instead, the address led him to a newly renovated floor in the Chrysler building. The reception area was intimidatingly minimalist. White marble floors, black steel furniture, and a view of the city that made Lucas dizzy. "Mr. O'Connell," the receptionist said, not looking up from her screen. "They are waiting for you in conference room A." Lucas walked down the long corridor. He checked his reflection in the glass wall. Perfect. He pushed open the heavy oak doors. The conference room was vast. At the far end sat a long table made of black obsidian, a nod to the company name. Reginald Graves sat at the right hand of the head of the table. But the chair at the head of the table was turned away facing the window. All Lucas could see was the back of a high black leather executive chair and a slender hand resting on the armrest, fingers tapping a rhythm that felt strangely familiar. "Mr. O'Connell," Reginald said, standing up. His voice was icy. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Graves," Lucas said, putting on his best winning smile. He walked forward, extending his hand. Reginald did not take it. Lucas awkwardly withdrew, clearing his throat. "I'm here to discuss the misunderstanding regarding the lease. Harrington Global has been a model tenant for 20 years. We are prepared to offer a significant increase in rent to maintain our partnership." "Partnership implies equality, Mr. O'Connell," Reginald said dryly. "We do not view you as partners. We view you as squatters on valuable land." Lucas bristled. "Squatters. We are a Fortune 500 firm. We employ 2,000 people in this building." "And you pay 1990s rent prices," Reginald countered. "But this isn't about money. The principal has a specific vision for the property, a vision that does not include Harrington Global." Lucas shifted his gaze to the turned chair. "Perhaps if I could speak to the principal directly, I'm sure we can find common ground." "Speak," the voice came from the chair. Lucas froze. The voice was low modulated, but it sent a shiver down his spine. It sounded like, "No, it couldn't be." "Sir," Lucas addressed the chair, assuming it was a man. "I know you value legacy. My firm is built on legacy. We build the future. Evicting us would be a stain on the city's economy. It would be cruel." "Cruel," the voice repeated. Interesting word choice. The chair slowly began to swivel. Lucas adjusted his cuffs, ready to make eye contact with some geriatric billionaire. The chair finished its turn. Sitting there was a woman. She wore a white suit that glowed against the dark room. Her hair was sharp, her makeup flawless. She looked like a cover model for Forbes, radiating a terrifying serene power. But it was the face. Lucas's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His brain short-circuited. He blinked once, twice, sure he was having a stroke. "Hello, Lucas," Sarah said. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She looked at him with the clinical detachment of a scientist examining a bug under a microscope. "Sarah," Lucas whispered the name, strangling him. "What? How?" "You're the secretary." Reginald chuckled a dry, rattling sound. "Mr. O'Connell, you are addressing Ms. Sarah Bennett, the sole proprietress of the Obsidian Trust and the owner of the building you are currently standing in. And coincidentally, the building your office is in." Lucas stumbled back, grabbing the back of a chair for support. "This is a joke. You're a waitress. You're broke. I left you with nothing." "You did," Sarah agreed calmly. She picked up a file from the table. "You left me with $12.43. I remember the exact amount. It's funny what sticks in your mind when you're hungry." "But the money, how?" Lucas was hyperventilating. "It doesn't matter how," Sarah said, waving her hand dismissively. "What matters is that I own the ground you walk on, Lucas. Literally." She opened the file. I've reviewed your proposal. You want a renewal. Yes. Lucas managed to say, his mind racing. She still loves me, he thought wildly. She must. This is a game. She wants me back. I can fix this. He straightened up, forcing a smile onto his pale face. Sarah, look, babe. I know things ended roughly, but this is incredible. You and me. Think of what we can do. We're a power couple now. I always knew you had it in you. I was pushing you, don't you see? I had to be hard on you to unlock this. Reginald looked like he was about to be sick, but Sarah didn't flinch. You were pushing me? Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, it was tough love. Lucas took a step forward, his confidence returning in a delusional rush. And it worked. Look at you, you're magnificent. We can forget the divorce. We can annul it. We can run this city together. Sarah stared at him for a long moment. The silence stretched until it was unbearable. Reginald, Sarah said softly, did Mr. O'Connell sign the lease termination acknowledgement? He did not, ma'am. Sarah, please, Lucas pleaded, reaching out. Don't do this. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry I left. I made a mistake. Jessica. She means nothing. She's shallow. You're the real deal. I love you. Sarah stood up. She walked around the table, her heels clicking on the marble. She stopped inches from Lucas. He could smell her perfume. Something expensive. Woody and floral, miles away from the diner. Coffee smell he used to mock. You don't love me, Lucas, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. You love the reflection of yourself you see in my success, but the mirror is broken. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a single item. It was the Mont Blanc pen he had used to sign the divorce papers. She had found it in the apartment after he left. She pressed it into his chest pocket. I'm not evicting Harrington Global, Sarah said. Lucas let out a sob of relief. Oh, thank God. Sarah, thank you. I knew you still... I'm not evicting the company, Sarah corrected him. I'm willing to renew the lease for 10 years, at the current rate. It's a gift. That's amazing, Lucas stammered. But there is one condition, Sarah said, her eyes hardening into diamonds. A clause I've added to the contract. It's non-negotiable. Anything, Lucas said. Anything you want. The key man clause, Sarah said. Usually it demands that a certain essential employee must remain at the company for the lease to be valid. But my clause is the opposite. It's a persona non grata clause. Lucas felt the cold creeping back into his veins. What does that mean? It means, Sarah said, leaning in close, that Harrington Global can stay in my building only if one specific employee is terminated immediately and permanently barred from the premises. She smiled, then a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You, Lucas. The condition is you. The silence that descended upon the conference room was absolute, a physical weight that pressed against Lucas's eardrums. The only sound was the distant, low-frequency hum of the city's infrastructure 40 floors below, a city Lucas was rapidly realizing was slipping through his fingers like sand. You can't do that, Lucas whispered the words scraping out of a dry throat. He looked from Sarah to Reginald, his eyes wide and frantic. That's illegal. That's discrimination. You can't dictate hiring policy to a third-party company. Reginald Graves adjusted his glasses, his expression mild but his tone possessing the finality of a gavel strike. It is a private contract between two corporate entities, Mr. O'Connell. We are not dictating policy. We are establishing risk management parameters. We simply stipulate that we do not wish for individuals with a documented history of financial irresponsibility, or what we deem moral bankruptcy, to have access to our property. It is a standard bad actor exclusion. Sarah didn't look at Lucas. She had turned her chair slightly, directing her gaze toward the door, dismissing him before he had even left the room. You have 1 hour to clear out your desk, Lucas, she said, her voice devoid of the warmth he used to take for granted. I've already sent the term sheet to Victor Moretti. He has it in his inbox right now. He knows the condition. In fact, he's waiting for the final signature page. Lucas stared at her profile, searching for a crack, a sign of the woman who used to mend his shirts and cook his meals. There was nothing. Just the marble-cold resolve of a stranger. He turned and ran. He didn't walk with the confident stride of a senior director. He sprinted out of the conference room, ignoring the startled gasp of the receptionist as he flew past the desk. He jammed the button for the elevator, his knuckles white, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "She's bluffing," he told himself, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Victor won't do it. I'm the star. I'm the rainmaker. He needs me." When the elevator doors dinged open on the Harrington Global floor at 400 Park Avenue, Lucas burst into the lobby. But the atmosphere was wrong. The usual chaotic buzz of the trading floor, the shouting, the phones ringing, the energy of money changing hands had dampened into a murmuring hush. As he rushed past the rows of desks, heads turned. The junior analysts, the ones he usually ignored or barked coffee orders at, were watching him. They weren't looking at him with the usual mix of fear and envy. They were whispering. They were looking at him like he was a dead man walking. He threw open the heavy glass door to Victor Moretti's corner office without knocking. "Victor, don't sign it," Lucas shouted, barging in. "It's a trick. She's trying to leverage you." Victor Moretti was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the view he had been terrified of losing just an hour ago. He didn't jump at Lucas's entrance. He turned slowly, his face etched with a strange mixture of relief and resignation. "It's not a trick, Lucas," Victor said heavily. He gestured to his computer screen where a digital document sat open. "I just got off the phone with their legal counsel. The lease renewal is real. 10 years. A fixed rate at current market value." Victor paused, letting the numbers hang in the air. "Do you know what that means for us? In this economy, it saves the company over $300 million in operating costs over the next decade. It saves the entire Q4 projection." "But the clause?" Lucas gasped, stepping forward, his hands shaking as he reached across the mahogany desk. "She wants you to fire me, Victor. She's my ex-wife. This is a personal vendetta. You can't let her dictate who you employ. I'm your top earner. I brought in the Hudson Yards deal. You can't trade me for rent." Victor looked at Lucas, really looked at him for the first time in years. He saw the sweat beading on his forehead, the desperation in his eyes, the arrogance that had curdled into panic. "You were a top earner, Lucas," Victor corrected him, his voice dropping to a cold, pragmatic monotone. "But you are not worth $300 million. No single employee is, not even me." "I can sue!" Lucas screamed, his voice cracking, spiraling out of control. "I'll sue you for wrongful termination. I'll sue her for tortious interference. I'll burn this place down." Victor's expression hardened. He picked up a piece of paper from his desk, a termination notice that had already been printed and signed. "You signed an at-will employment contract, Lucas," Victor said sharply. "And frankly, after hearing what you did to her, leaving her destitute while you expensed $300 lunches to this firm, I don't think a jury is going to like you very much. You're a liability, Lucas. And I don't keep liabilities on the payroll." Victor pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Security. Yes, he's here. Please escort Mr. O'Connell out of the building immediately." "Victor, please." Lucas pleaded, his dignity shattering. "I have a mortgage. I have a wedding coming up. You can't do this." 2 large security guards stepped into the office. These were men Lucas had walked past every morning for 3 years without ever learning their names. Now they were the arbiters of his fate. "Let's go, Mr. O'Connell," one said, his voice deep and unyielding, grabbing Lucas's arm with a grip like iron. "Get your hands off me," Lucas shouted, thrashing as they dragged him backward. "I'm a senior director. You work for me." "Not anymore, sir," the guard said. They dragged him out of the office and into the main hallway. The entire office had stopped working to watch the spectacle. The interns he had bullied, the secretaries he had dismissed as overhead, the junior associates whose ideas he had stolen, they were all standing there, a silent gallery of witnesses to his downfall. There was no sympathy in their eyes. There was only the grim satisfaction of seeing gravity finally take hold. They marched him to the elevator, rode it down in stony silence, and hauled him through the pristine marble lobby. With a final shove, they threw him out onto the sidewalk of Park Avenue. "And don't come back," the guard said, tossing Lucas's leather briefcase onto the wet concrete beside him. The glass door slid shut. His keycard was deactivated before he could even stand up. It had started to rain, a cold, gray drizzle that soaked into his Savile Row suit within seconds. Lucas stood there, drenched, shivering, staring at the revolving doors that were now barred to him. He fumbled for his phone with wet, trembling fingers. He had to call Jessica. She was his lifeline. Her father, the tech mogul, was powerful. He could fix this. He could get Lucas a job at Vane Technologies. This was just a setback, a story they would laugh about on their yacht in a few years. "Jessica," he panted when she finally answered, trying to inject a note of confidence into his voice. "Babe, listen. Something crazy happened. You're not going to believe this. Sarah, she's the owner. The ghost. She forced them to cut me loose. It's insane. But listen, I need you to talk to your dad. I need an intro at Vane Tech. Just until I sue them and get my settlement." There was a long, hollow silence on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that screams louder than shouting. "I know," Jessica said. Her voice was clipped, devoid of the bubbly warmth he was used to. "It's all over the industry blogs, Lucas. Harrington VP fired as condition of billion-dollar lease deal. You're trending on Twitter. They're calling it the O'Connell Clause. So, it's press. There's no such thing as bad publicity, right? We can spin this." "My father called me 5 minutes ago," Jessica said, her tone icy. "He said you're radioactive. If Sarah Bennett has that kind of leverage over Harrington, she likely has influence elsewhere. Vane Tech leases 3 warehouses on her land in Queens. We can't afford to be enemies with the Obsidian Trust." Lucas felt the ground open up beneath him. "Jessica, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I can't be with a liability," Jessica replied, the word echoing Victor's judgment. "It's a bad look, Lucas. A man who gets fired by his ex-wife. It's pathetic. The wedding is off." "Jessica, wait. Don't come to the apartment." She cut him off. "I've already sent your things to the concierge. The doorman has been instructed not to let you up. Goodbye, Lucas." The line went dead. Lucas lowered the phone, staring at the black screen as the rain ran down his face, mixing with tears he hadn't realized he was shedding. He looked up at the skyscraper towering above him, the steel and glass monolith he used to think he owned. High above on the 40th floor, he imagined Sarah looking down, but she wasn't. She wasn't watching him suffer. She wasn't thinking about him at all. She had already moved on to the next meeting, leaving him standing in the rain, a man who had traded everything for gold only to find himself holding a handful of dust. 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was alive with a symphony of crystal flutes, low laughter, and the soft rustle of silk. It was the annual gala for the New York Restoration Project, an event where the city's power brokers gathered to congratulate themselves on shaping the metropolis. But tonight, the center of gravity wasn't the mayor, nor was it the senators mingling near the open bar. The magnetic pull of the room was focused entirely on one woman standing beneath the cascading chandeliers. Sarah Bennett wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the ambient light, tailored to perfection, to accentuate a posture that had become steely and regal. She held a glass of sparkling water, listening intently as a property developer twice her age pitched an idea for a joint venture. She didn't just look wealthy. She looked substantial, as if she were as permanent and formidable as the skyscrapers her trust now commanded. In just 12 months, the mysterious ghost of the real estate world had stepped into the light. Sarah had transformed the Obsidian Trust from a passive, stagnant holding company into an aggressive force for ethical development. She had rehabilitated historic brownstones, lowered commercial rents to save dying small businesses, and funded public parks, where concrete slabs had once sat. The press had given her a new title, one she wore with quiet pride, the queen of the skyline. Ms. Bennett. Sarah turned to find a senior correspondent from the Times standing there, a recorder already in hand. A moment the room is buzzing about your announcement regarding the South Bronx initiative. Is it true you're buying back the entire city block on 148th Street? Sarah smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. Eyes that were no longer shadowed by exhaustion or fear. It is true. We aren't just buying it. We're rebuilding it. We're turning it into a mixed-income community with rent-stabilized units for service workers. Good housing shouldn't be a luxury, Mr. Evans. It should be a right. The reporter scribbled furiously. You seem to have a deep personal connection to that specific neighborhood. Is there a reason? Sarah paused. The memory of a cold radiator and a plate of plain spaghetti flashed through her mind, sharp and vivid. I do, she said softly, her voice steady. It's where I lived when I had nothing. And it's where I learned exactly what I was made of. As the flashbulbs popped blinding white light against the blue velvet, Sarah felt a sudden need for air. She excused herself gracefully, slipping through the heavy French doors onto the limestone terrace overlooking Fifth Avenue. The winter air was crisp and biting, stinging her cheeks in a way that felt grounding. She walked to the stone balustrade and looked out over the city. It was a grid of gold and amber pulsating with life. A year ago, this city had tried to crush her. Now she held the deed to its foundation. She took a deep breath, inhaling the cold, finally free of the weight of someone else's expectations. 40 floors below, the reality was different. The traffic on Fifth Avenue was a snarled river of red taillights and exhaust fumes. Near the subway entrance, a man was huddled into a coat that was fraying at the seams. He was arguing with a street vendor, his voice shrill with frustration as he counted out nickels and dimes from a worn leather wallet. It was Lucas. He wasn't homeless, but he was balancing precariously on the edge of ruin. The fall from grace had been absolute. After the firing at Harrington Global, the industry had closed ranks. The key man clause Sarah had enforced became legendary, branding Lucas as a liability. He had sued, of course, fueled by arrogance and rage, but he had lost. The legal fees had drained his savings, and the reputation damage had torched his network. Now Lucas sold timeshares in New Jersey. He spent 4 hours a day commuting on a bus that smelled of diesel, pitching bad investments to people who couldn't afford them, only to return to a studio apartment that was smaller, damper, and darker than the one he had forced Sarah out of. That's all I have, Lucas snapped at the vendor, grabbing the hot dog. He turned away, hunching his shoulders against the wind, taking a bite of the lukewarm meat. It tasted like ash. He looked up, drawn by some instinct, some feeling of being watched. The Pierre Hotel loomed above him, a fortress of warmth and exclusivity. On the terrace, bathed in the golden spill of the ballroom lights, he saw a silhouette. The figure was distant but unmistakable. The cut of the hair, the poise, the way she held herself, it was Sarah. Lucas stopped chewing. He stood frozen on the dirty sidewalk, the crowd rushing past him, bumping his shoulders. He squinted, trying to bring her into focus. Up on the balcony, Sarah looked down. Her gaze locked onto the small, disheveled figure standing near the subway grate. For a heartbeat, time suspended. Lucas waited for a reaction. He expected her to point, to laugh, or perhaps to look away in shame. He wanted her to be angry. If she was angry, it meant he still mattered. It meant he still had power over her. But Sarah didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply looked at him. In her eyes there was no spark of recognition. There was no hatred, no triumph, no pity. There was only a vast, terrifying indifference. She looked at him the way one looks at a stranger in a crowd or a gust of wind. Something temporary and inconsequential. She was the ocean, and he was just a piece of driftwood she had long since washed ashore. With a slow, deliberate movement, Sarah turned her back on him. She didn't look back. She walked toward the warmth of the ballroom, toward the laughter, toward the future she had built with her own hands. Lucas watched the heavy glass doors close, sealing her into a world he could no longer touch. He stood alone in the cold, clutching his cheap dinner, shivering as the realization finally hit him. He had spent years telling her she had a poverty mindset. He had been wrong. Poverty wasn't about the money in the bank. It was about the emptiness of the soul. Sarah had been rich when she was poor because she had integrity, loyalty, and grit. And he had been poor even when he was rich because he had nothing inside him but greed. The wind howled down the avenue, cutting through his thin coat, but the cold inside his chest was colder still. That is the story of Sarah Bennett and the man who didn't know the value of the treasure he held until he threw it into the street. It is a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't defined by the balance in your bank account, but by how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you. Lucas chased the glitter of gold and lost the diamond. Sarah lost the dead weight and learned to soar. If you enjoyed this story of karma, resilience, and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. And if you want more stories about people getting exactly what they deserve, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that the wheel always turns. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.